Great to bring in my good friend Thomas Frank Carr. T. Frank, I hope you are doing well.
Steve, doing great. How are you doing this fine time of year?
Doing great. You know, it's just
Good.
Calm before the storm.
Lots of golf. I'm imagining you're out on the links quite a bit this time of year.
Yes, I have played a fair amount. Yes. Have I improved?
Very good.
Have I improved? We can debate. All right. So you wrote an interesting article that was posted today about Penn State formationally and the explosive plays and so forth. It brought with it some conclusions maybe some people didn't expect. What were some of those conclusions?
Yeah, so we talked a lot last year and this off season and for a while now about how Penn State's receivers were a drag on the team, right? And so as a general consensus about the passing game and Tyler Warren's effect on the team. I started out with a question of looking at the offense, and really this started as a question about the tight ends. How do you redistribute those snaps from Tyler Warren, who had 916 snaps last year, took 50% of all the tight end snaps that happened for Penn State. But you know how I am. I can't just stop at the question. I have to get to the question behind the question of, okay, so should they? Should they do that? How many snaps should the tight ends get in relation to the rest of the other offensive formations? And what I found throughout the course of this investigation is Penn State was actually more explosive. And if explosive plays are our metric for what the offense is trying to achieve, which explosive plays turn into points and touchdowns, and that's the whole goal of offense, Penn State was more explosive out of 3 receiver sets than it was out of 2 tight end sets or 2 or more tight ends on the field. So despite all of the frustrations in the passing game, if you look at the team's overall explosive rate, they were as explosive and actually slightly more explosive with 3 receivers on the field, Tyler Warren and a running back, as opposed to having 2 tight ends on the field. And so I found that interesting, fascinating, but also confirms something that I think of and James Franklin talked about in the spring of, if you have more viable receivers on the field, they create more threats across the literal width of the field and open up more passing windows, explosive plays, and touchdowns for your offense. So it was very fascinating to see, run or pass, it didn't matter. The team was more explosive in those 3 receiver sets as opposed to 2 tight ends.
Well, in the 3 receiver set, there's a domino effect to it because you got 3 receivers running different routes. They're taking people with them, which then opens up passing lanes for somebody else, and that's, I think, in part why Travis Kelce with Kansas City's effective and why Tyler Warren was effective last year for Penn State. Other openings were created that they took advantage of.
Yeah, and that is kind of the nature of the spread offense revolution. And this gets back to something very basic that, Steve, even you and I can do, which is, can you count to 11? And when you have your offense, you only have 5 eligible receivers, right? So this is just basic math and basic either-or principles. If you have 2 tight ends and a running back plus 5 offensive linemen and 1 quarterback between the hashes, like in the formation with the offensive line, you have created gravity on the field. Now, in some situations, in some circumstances, you can generate explosive plays by vacating the rest of the field and having one-on-one matchups, kind of like basketball, right? Like ISO plays for just one receiver. But those are inherently volatile plays, as opposed to if you use every blade of grass and you use that as a weapon against the defense, whether it's zone or man, the defense fundamentally does not have enough bodies to cover 20 yards down the field, 15 yards down the field, 5 yards down the field. Oh, and by the way, 5 gigantic offensive linemen, 5 giant men who are going to block a disproportionate number of players in the box. So it just becomes a numbers game and an allocation of resources. And with 3 receiver sets, this is kind of the understood logic in college football that I went through at that article today for BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. By the way, thank you for reading it and for mentioning that. You can sign up now if you want to read it for just $1 for the first week to sign up to try us out.
And it's fascinating. It's typical of what you're going to get on the site, so people understand that. There's also another part of this, and people say, why Penn State so many two tight end sets over the years. The tight ends compete with the wide receivers, and you put your best pass catchers, pass receivers on the field, and sometimes for Penn State that's been two tight ends.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is not to say that Penn State should play three receivers at the cost of playing the better players. But we're in July, right? So, this is the ruminations of what's the best case scenario? What's the best plan? And I don't think it's a coincidence that Penn State went out into the transfer portal and got three receivers for their team. Now, part of that obviously is through the necessity of guys leaving the program, the Trey Wallace and Harrison Wallace. Trey Wallace. I've already messed it up. Trey Wallace and Amari Evans leaving the team. And so you do need to replace those players as just functional starters in your team. But Penn State did not settle with, okay, we've got two receivers. That was our primary package last year. They went out and got Trevor Pena in the transfer portal. I think this is a part of, James Franklin, when I asked him, what do you want your offense to look like this spring and how do you want to rebalance the passing attack? He brought up, if we had Tyler Warren and more receivers, you can be more dangerous. And so, as we sit here in July, nothing's been written. Those three receivers haven't asserted themselves as the starters on the team. But if you're asking yourself, hey, how does Penn State get Andrew Rappelier, Khalil Dinkins, and Luke Reynolds on the field? You also have to ask the question, do you want to do that? Is that the best plan of attack? Now, those players might be better players overall than the three receivers, but at this point, we don't know that. So that's going to be what they decide in fall camp and throughout the season. Who's going to compete for that third spot as a receiver, whether it's a second running back, which is going to be a big part of the offense, which I get into in the article, or if it's going to be that second tight end or the third receiver. The general conclusion, based off of what they did last year, they were more explosive with three receivers on the field. And also, as something we get into the article, teams that play with three receivers primarily as an offense scored more points on explosive plays than teams that played with two tight ends. Right. So, if we're just following all the logic trains, they all lead to this is the preferred way, but it's not the only way. Penn State was a drive away from the college football playoff championship game last year, so you don't need to blow everything up. We're just talking a little bit about football theory and a little bit about what might happen this year, some of those kind of higher level concepts of what's preferable versus what is real. And it might be that Penn State's three tight ends and two running backs are the best five, and they will continue to see more time on the field than the third receiver.
An element where Penn State was better last year, without question, was the ability of the primary two running backs to be more effective in the passing game. What does that do to figure in what you're talking about with this scenario?
Well, so I didn't dive into that as much in terms of the passing game, from the running back perspective. But in general, again, it's all about space creation and threats on the football field. So if you generate threats with three receivers across the formation, plus you have a tight end, now your third or fourth option, if you're the defense of levels of threat, you now have to account for the running back last. A lot of teams account for the running back in the passing game last. And so now you maybe have your fourth best coverage defender on Nick Singleton, and good luck with that. We saw last year when that happened, Penn State was able to take advantage of that and cause massive problems for defenses. And with Katron Allen and Nick Singleton on the field at the same time, you also have this dynamic of there's a primary running threat and a secondary passing threat from those two at the same time. So I think that there's that interplay then of one leading to the other and how all of this kind of connects together, and then the offensive coordinator's creativity to find a way to exploit some of those problems for the defense, knowing what they know about their personnel and their formations.
Because on the touchdown pass that tied the USC game, it was to Nick Singleton, and he was the fourth option, the fourth read on the play.
Yep.
Right, and that's why you bring that up because what does it say about Drew Aller in terms of progressions that he's able to work his way through when you've got three wides out there to pick the best option, which sometimes can be the tight end.
So I think this is a really important conversation for this upcoming season, and one that has two parts to it. So you mentioned having three receivers out there and the options you have from a receiver perspective, but there's also the element of the players involved, right? So I guess I'll start there in terms of last season, at times, the offense was not designed around the quarterback. It was designed around Tyler Warren, whether it was from him taking direct snaps or schemed plays. The spirit of the offense was, how do we get Tyler the football? And that's deservedly so. This year, that would fall presumably on Nick Singleton and Katron Allen, who already have that emphasis in the run game. All you have to do is then dial up or down the number of carries those guys get and the number of plays you design for them. I'm personally of the opinion that when you're designing plays for the running backs in the passing game, it's a risky proposition because the average depth of a running back route is negative yards downfield. So you are not generating threats down the field to stretch the defense in the way that we talked about originally. But you can, and then Andy Kotelnicki is very good about this, use them as a downfield threat in their own right. Isolation against the weakest defenders we talked about, generating those explosive yards. Beyond that, I think the opportunity this year is that the passing game itself is designed around Drew Aller. There's no one standout player as we sit here on July 11th that is the guy who's going to dominate the touches in the passing game. Now, last year it wasn't Tyler Warren until it was patently obvious, right?
Right.
But in the absence of that, with three very good, and I've called them professional receivers, they're good at playing the position.
Yep.
But none of them are dominated in every single way. Then the star of the game becomes the quarterback, the distributor, the point guard on the offense to make the decision of where does the ball go with those three receivers on the field with that tight end. And it becomes more about what Drew Aller can do with his mind, and it can be more about him making the defense wrong at all turns. Because, again, defensive structures, you have to give the offense something. It's about obscuring where the opportunity is and making sure they can't get to your weakness. Aller's a senior quarterback. That should be very hard for defenses to do this year. And then I guess the final thing is, it's his second year in the offense, where I think last year if there was an area to me that I saw maybe a step back from Aller from a previous season, it was his play on second reads, where maybe things were a little rushed mentally, where he got to the right answer, but maybe he didn't get to it as cleanly as he did in the Mike Yurcich offense, having been in it 2 years. I think there's an opportunity where Drew Aller is that guy again this year, and that's amplified by the fact that he's getting those opportunities to do that in the passing game.
What do you think it means that he's had sit-downs with Jim Knowles and was able to get an opposing scout face-to-face about the things he does extremely well that worries them and the things that they weren't as worried about?
Yeah, I mean, information is information, right? Like, if you can... We all have a perception of who we are and what we are. But that internal perception doesn't matter, especially in a conflict situation or in a binary situation like football. It matters what your opponent knows about you and what they are emphasizing. So, Jim Knowles is unbelievably sophisticated from a passing game perspective. His defense is built on obscuring what the quarterback can see and what the quarterback can know about his game. And so from that perspective, I think it's very valuable that, here's what we see from you and what we see from you as a passer. And then the individual skill level of, I think there was one conversation about the way he throws his deep ball and things that you're willing to give him versus things that you don't want to give him. I think those are all great teaching points of areas of emphasis for him to say, okay, this is what I need to improve on. So then if the defense gives that to me, they are going to pay for that. Because I do think that there are certain things you can give to the Penn State offense last year, vertical routes, one-on-one situations with receivers that isn't maybe just about Aller, but is partially about Aller, that then become, it's fine to give those and take away other things that are easier. And so, I think that the general conversation, for a young guy too, like Aller, I think is valuable to understand strengths and weaknesses, how they're perceived by somebody else.
Except for watching a little bit of the Holiday Bowl, I really have not seen Trevor Pena play. So I won't get a real read or feel on him until I see him in training camp. I will assume that you looked at him on tape, and if so, what struck you about him?
So I'd go back to what I said is a really professional receiver. His routes are good. Yeah. His releases off the line of scrimmage, I think, are very good. He understands where he needs to be on the field from a depth and timing perspective. And he's got fight to him. So when the ball is in the air, he's not the biggest guy in the world, but he can play above the rim, and he's got that mentality of, I don't care how big you are, the ball is mine.
Right.
And I'm not going to let you have it. So that concentration and that body control through the catch point, I think is super valuable. Giving the quarterback the opportunity to throw the ball to a spot and then having him be rewarded by you being there. And that really, I think, is what embodies this receiving core to varying degrees in their own skill sets, right? So not everyone's going to have the exact same skill set within this conversation, but for Pena, that's what I see from him is he's going to be a reliable target that is going to be where he needs to be, and Aller can rely on, okay, I know where my slot receiver is going to be. I know where my Z is going to be, and I can throw the ball with timing and rhythm and confidence as long as they can get that, work all that stuff out from the chemistry perspective this summer and during camp. I think those are his skill sets. And then there's a certain amount of vertical ability from the slot where he might not be the fastest guy in the world, but his routes are very good. And so if you throw the ball early in that route, he'll have separation to go get it. And maybe it's tighter at the end than it seemed like at the beginning when he's able to break away from the DB. But I feel more confident that he's going to catch that ball than I don't when I'm watching him on film. So a lot of really soft skills. Because if you look at him and you watch him for the height, weight, speed traits and the gaudy separation and explosive abilities, you might say, why does Penn State want this player? But the longer you watch and the more you appreciate what he does at the position, you can see how he fits into that offense from that particular skill set perspective of being the guy that Drew Aller can rely on as a credible target on every play.
Yeah, that's why when Drew went to California earlier this year, I thought it was such a big plus that Kyron Hudson came over every day and worked with him when they were out there. That's building that chemistry right there. It's so important. Hey, thanks so much for the time. As always, terrific. Great to talk with you. Can't wait to chat again, my friend.
Yeah, always enjoy it. And if anyone wants to continue the conversation, give my shameless plug in here again.
Please.
BlueWhiteIllustrated.com, just $1 sign up for a week, and then you decide if you want to have these philosophical conversations with me via message board posts. We're always over there having these conversations. And, of course, reading the other things from all of our incredible reporters at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. But, Steve, always appreciate this conversation and having a chance to just chat about football.
Thanks so much, T. Appreciate you, buddy.
Take care.
Thomas Frank Carr on 3.com, Blue White Illustrated.